South America is teetering on the edge of a major armed conflict for the first time in more than 75 years. Venezuela argues that the Esequibo region of Guyana was unlawfully taken when the border was established over a century ago. President Nicolas Maduro has made a series of announcements suggesting that his government plans to annex the territory west of the Esequibo River by force if necessary. A new airstrip is being constructed to enable military operations, and new housing projects are being set up to bolster localized leverage. Additionally, Venezuela claims a special maritime zone that bisects Guyana's waters. These waters have oil and lots of it, but they're located awfully distant from Venezuela. Wouldn't it be nice if Caracas had control over the Essequibo region? It would certainly place it closer to the oil. Frankly, the only shocking thing about Venezuela's claim to Guyana's sovereignty is that it didn't happen sooner. All the same, Guyana has put its army on high alert. The US Air Force is conducting flight exercises just around the corner, and Brazil has deployed its army to the hinterlands nearby. The dispute has many on edge, because when oil is on the line, a little nuisance like international law will not get in the way. Working on this topic, as with many of our videos, is difficult because most sources are not accessible from my location. Sometimes, when I try using a local website, I'm blocked from doing so. Like China's Great Firewall, many like-minded states employ nationwide firewalls to bar information coming in and out. So I have to pretend to be elsewhere, and I do so with today's sponsor, NordVPN. Using the app, I can place myself virtually anywhere in the world, which opens up endless sources of content. But it's more than just that. The minds behind NordVPN have created a suite of cybersecurity tools. Threat protection shields me from malware, trackers, and ads. It also informs me about the vulnerabilities in my apps and much more. Meanwhile, NordPass allows me to store all my unique passwords securely in one place. There is also NordLocker, a place where I can keep all my files securely on the cloud, backed up, and accessible from anywhere. I know this sounds like a lot, but NordVPN is more than just a VPN, and you can find these products included in the complete plan at checkout. If you want to give this a go, click the link in my description. It's nordvpn.com/CaspianReport. There is a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can try it out for up to 30 days and get all of your money back if it's something you don't think is very useful to you. Clicking that link helps support this channel, but it also gets you an extra extended subscription to NordVPN. You get the 2-year plan plus 4 extra months. The link is in the description. Thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring today's video. Home to swaths of the Amazon rainforest, the Esequibo region is about the size of Greece and rich in mineral deposits, including gold and copper. It lies west of the Esequibo River and is home to approximately 128,000 people, making up about 16% of Guyana's total population. However, Venezuelan textbooks and government maps mark Esequibo as a disputed territory, and they've done so since the 1960s. But the roots of this dispute go back a century when colonial powers ruled over the area, Spain in the case of Venezuela and Britain in the case of Guyana. At the time, Spain and Britain had not yet agreed on the boundary between their colonies, but there was a general understanding that it should follow the Esequibo River. However, the discovery of gold, the commissioning of cartographer explorers, and the politics back in Europe made things a tad more complicated. So, when Venezuela declared its independence, it inherited the territorial dispute. Later, in 1899, arbitrators from Britain, Russia, and the United States decided that the territory belonged to Guyana, which was a British colony at the time. Venezuela, however, argued that the decision was invalid because they were absent during the negotiations and their side was represented by the United States instead. Venezuelan lawmakers claimed that arbitrators had conspired to cheat their country out of the land, and evidence provided decades later does reveal legal irregularities. So, Venezuela's claim is not totally made up. There is a rationale behind it. Either way, after some diplomatic exchange, a new agreement was reached in 1966, one that recognized Esequibo as a disputed region. The United Nations was assigned to resolve the case, but nothing ever came of it. Guyana, meanwhile, says the initial accord from 1899 is legal and binding, and it has taken the case to the International Court of Justice, which somewhat voted in its favor, or at least in favor of the existing status quo. But a few technicalities have not stopped Caracas from claiming land that many of its citizens have long seen as rightfully theirs. So in early December, the government initiated a referendum to assert its sovereignty over the Esequibo region. About 95% of Venezuelan voters approved of the claim. That being said, the referendum is soaked in controversy. The National Electoral Council says to have counted more than 10 million votes, but that would mean more people voted in favor of Esequibo than they did for Hugo Chavez when he was re-elected in 2012. Plus, the vote was immediately followed by massive roundups of those who allegedly opposed the annexation. So yeah, controversy. It also remains unclear how Caracas would enforce the outcome of the vote. South America has not seen a territorial conflict in over 75 years. Will Venezuela be the one to break that lucky streak? In relation, Guyana views the referendum as a move towards annexation, and the vote has its residents on edge. Right on the heels of the referendum, Maduro proposed a new law to ban all Venezuelan companies from doing business with Guyana. Now, the Venezuelan military is building an airstrip at La Camora, near the border with Guyana, which could come in handy when conducting logistical operations to annex Esequibo. Still nearby, Venezuela is constructing new housing for locals near the disputed border, which could be used as a launch point for additional incursions into Guyana's territory. An armed conflict is now more likely than before. However, actually invading the Esequibo region would be a hopeless mission. The area is literally a jungle, and it refuses to be tamed. Road infrastructure is lacking, as are population centers. Armored vehicles would just get stuck, and logistics would quickly bog down. Invading by river is not a feasible option either, since it's not deep enough, not even for a brown water navy. Overall, the density of the jungle makes any major military operation essentially impossible. The only paved road running from Venezuela to Guyana goes through Brazil, and Brazilians have deployed some 600 soldiers and armored vehicles to the northern border to secure their infrastructure. A full-scale invasion is just not in the cards. Technically, Venezuela could do an amphibious assault and land in Georgetown and then force Guyana to concede the Esequibo region. But if either the British Navy or the US Navy were to intervene, the Venezuelan plan would fall apart faster than a sandcastle at high tide. Guyana has no military force to speak of. Its 4,150 soldiers are too few to secure the land border, let alone fight against Venezuela. So Maduro might just roll the dice on Esequibo, and if he wins big. The thing about the Esequibo dispute is that it's not really about Esequibo, it's about what lies just off its coast. In 2015, partially within Guyana's exclusive economic zone, ExxonMobil discovered a reservoir holding at least 11 billion barrels of crude oil, a sum worth fighting for. Shortly after the discovery, Esequibo's economic value surged. Guyana began pumping oil in 2019, and production reached 278,000 barrels per day by 2022, which resulted in a GDP growth of 57%. Likewise, Guyana is expected to remain one of the fastest-growing economies with double-digit growth rates in the coming years. The country is on track to becoming South America's wealthiest nation on a per capita basis. Since its newfound wealth, billions of dollars have poured into the capital, Georgetown. Guyana has put the new money to use and initiated major infrastructure projects. It is constructing its first deep-water port and developing new energy facilities to double its national energy output. Meanwhile, on an international level, Guyana has signed deals to sell oil to China, Qatar, Malaysia, and possibly India. Slowly but assuredly, Guyana is transforming from a geopolitical backwater to a developing nation with an even more promising future ahead. Much of this process, however, has come to the dismay of neighboring Venezuela. The country has the largest volume of proven oil reserves on Earth, besting even Saudi Arabia. However, in recent years, hyperinflation has crippled the government's ability to invest in production and set off an economic crisis. As a result, oil production is in a slump and has been for some time. In the same year that Guyana discovered oil, Venezuela's production dropped from 2.5 million barrels per day to barely a million today. If things keep going at this rate, Guyana's oil production will outpace that of Venezuela within a decade. For the Maduro government, nothing could be more humiliating. Hyperinflation has also done a number on Venezuela's socio-economic state. According to the International Monetary Fund, the country suffered from the world's highest consumer price increase this year, with inflation reaching as high as 360%. Not surprisingly, Maduro's public approval is low, and corruption continues to eat away at the federal government's capacity. Clearly, Maduro needs a political win, desperately so. Esequibo could therefore offer a ticket out of the socio-economic mess. If Venezuela were to take the region, it could then lay claim to the offshore wealth found in Guyana's exclusive economic zone. One technicality, though, is that much of the oil off Guyana's coast rests in the east, away from the Essequibo's maritime equidistance point. So, in order to lay claim to the oil found in the east, Venezuela unilaterally extended its maritime boundary with Guyana by creating a space called the Atlantic Maritime Integral Defense Zone. It conveniently splits Guyana's maritime holdings and shrinks Guyanese claims to the offshore continental shelf. Venezuela is not a party to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and does not recognize the internationally drawn maritime boundary with Guyana. So, whether Venezuela's maritime claim is a violation of international law is debatable, but it's a lousy deal for Guyana just the same. Even if Venezuela's territorial and maritime claim is merely political rhetoric and no fighting ever took place, it would still be useful to the ruling government in Caracas. By laying an official claim to the region, Maduro gets to boost the credentials of his United Socialist Party while painting the political opposition as disloyal and unpatriotic. However one looks at it, Maduro will gain political votes by instigating a conflict, which would come in handy for the presidential elections scheduled for the second half of 2024. On the flip side, a conflict of this magnitude is bigger than just Venezuela. The United States is distracted and stretched thinly due to the hostilities in Ukraine and Israel. These ongoing battle spaces make it difficult for Washington to deal with a new geopolitical front in South America. Russia, China, and Iran would be the first to profit from an American military operation against Venezuela. Putin also happens to be a close ally of Maduro. Venezuela has acquired more than $12 billion worth of military hardware from Russia, measured up until 2011. That sum is likely higher now and is known to have included S-300 air defense systems, making Venezuela's air defense the best in South America. Putin has also helped Maduro consolidate power in Caracas, giving the latter political credibility, if nothing else. So, Russia could try to lobby the Venezuelans and persuade them that they could get away with a land grab operation at this point in time. A new geopolitical front would be disastrous for the United States. As powerful as America is, it has only so many carrier battle groups readily available for redeployment, and each redeployment comes at the expense of a status quo elsewhere. So, Washington must prioritize its battles, and Venezuela might not be worth fighting. Then again, put America and oil together and you get a most combustible reaction. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Thank you for watching and Saro.